Hi everyone, my name is Leah and we're going to be talking about planting for pollinators in Lincolnshire today. So, this project was carried out to provide the public with a list of wildflowers that, when planted in variation, would give their gardens the potential to be in full bloom all year round, which in turn would mean that they would be providing food for pollinators all year round as well. Why are pollinators important? Pollinators are important as they carry out the crucial process of pollination, without which we wouldn't have food such as vegetables, fruits, certain beans such as coffee beans, certain nuts such as almonds, and even the cocoa beans used to make our chocolate. But on top of this, they're also important for our ecosystems. In our ecosystems, we have habitats. These habitats have an abundance of flowers in them. These flowers in turn provide shelter and food and other services to our wildlife, which in turn increases an area's biodiversity. So if we continue to lose pollinators at the rate we are, we will lose a lot of the flowers we have. And if we lose flowers from a habitat, we also lose the biodiversity and are left with quite a barren habitat. So why are our gardens important for their survival? In the UK, we have increased agriculture expansion and urbanisation, which means a lot of the land left isn't natural. For example, in England, there's only 14.5% of the land left is natural, which isn't a lot. So if we use the areas which we own, for example our gardens, to help have little homes inside these urban areas to provide pollinators, it would make their life a lot easier and increase their chances of survival. For example, if we take a street, if a bee lives in point A and the only other food source on this street is point B, the bee has to travel all this way just to get to it, which a lot of things can happen to a bee in this space of time because it's quite a distance to travel. However, if a few of us plant even just a couple of flowers, this bee can make more stops, and at any one of these stops it can go back to the hive and back and forth, and there's more food for it available. If we look on a neighbourhood scale, for example where there is a urban green area such as a park, if no one else has flowers in this neighbourhood, these bees are very limited to this small area. However, if some of us who perhaps really enjoy gardening have an abundance of flowers in our garden, these bees can suddenly travel and cover more ground and have more food available to them. Now, if we include those of us who do not like gardening or perhaps do not have the room or the time to maintain a garden, plant even just one or two flowers outside, these bees suddenly have so much more land and food available to them, which of course will help them survive. So why do they need food all year round? Well, bees, just like us, without food all year round would starve. And even though many of them either hibernate or die off before winter, some of them can still be found deep into winter searching for food, such as the bumblebees. So that's why it's important to have food for them all year round, and why it's important for them to have spaces in our gardens where they can feed, as their natural environments are dwindling. So making the list, I used the Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust wildflower list. From this, I compared this list to the Botanical Society of Britain and Ireland's list, which tells me whether or not they're native. If they were native, I then looked on the map of the UK to see if they were included in Lincolnshire. If they were both native and found in Lincolnshire, I would then use the Collins Wildflower Guide to see when they bloomed. Now, the reason I had to make sure they're found in Lincolnshire is because Lincolnshire is quite a dry region of the UK, and on top of that has long, cold winters, so it's important that the flowers can survive in these conditions. So a word for example, so Mandurum was found on the Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust list. It was also, according to the Botanical Society's list, is native to the UK, and according to their map, is found in Lincolnshire, so it would have been included in the list to make the chart. The chart in question is a Gantt chart, which works by having the common species name on the left, the period of blooming represented in the bars, and the months at the bottom. So for example, if we look at ivy at the bottom here, we can see that it is in bloom from September to the end of November, so it's in bloom all of autumn. However, two above it, the common glasswort, is in bloom from August to the end of September, and is in bloom halfway through summer to a bit into autumn. So that's how you use this list. And if you plant a variety of flowers from this list, your garden can have the ability to be in bloom all year round. For example, these flowers, if they were planted in combination, you would have at least one flower in bloom all year round. Another example of what your garden could look like in summer versus winter, just to show you that there's pretty flowers available in both, just so you know. Now, the reason why we're looking at native over non-native flowers is because there's been multiple studies carried out that suggest that native flowers are slightly better for our pollinators than exotic ones. For example, the funnel-shaped flowers are better than head or disc-shaped flowers for our pollinators. This also stretches into like food sources, for example, the quality of nectar and pollen available to them, which is what our pollinators feed off. This is because pollinators in the UK, the plants need to be attractive and accessible to them, and if they're not, they cannot use them. For example, Salvia splendens. This is a common garden plant as it's quite extravagant and beautiful. However, in its natural country, it is pollinated by hummingbirds, which have long beaks and long tongues. Therefore, these flowers are too deep to be pollinated by our English bees, as their tongues cannot reach down the flower tube to reach the nectar. So even though these gardens may look like they're in full bloom, this food source is very poor quality for our pollinators, which is why it's important to plant native flowers. For example, Viper's bugloss in the top left corner or dandelion in the central bit with a honeybee. It's important that we plant these flowers so our pollinators can access them. And when it comes to including these flowers in your garden, you do not have to stick strictly to wildflowers. You can mix decorative and wildflowers together. Or you can perhaps have margins of wildflowers, like around your lawn or your vegetable patches. You can have paths going through like big bushes or meadows of wildflowers if you like. And for those of us who perhaps do not have the room to garden, do not like gardening, or are worried about these flowers becoming dominant and outcompeting your decorative flowers, you can just put them in pots, which is a great way to display them and have them out in the garden. For example, if you've got a concrete garden, you can just put them in a pot. Now, the pollinators you will attract, because I imagine a lot of us think we're going to attract butterflies and bees. We will, but there'll also be pollinators such as beetles, such as the black and yellow longhorn beetle or the soldier beetle. A huge variety of hoverflies, for example, the marmalade hoverfly or the pine hoverfly. Of course, a large variety of butterflies and also moths, as well as a variety of bees from the white-tailed bumblebee to the tree bumblebee. However, if there is specific pollinators you do want to attract, there is certain information and flower features you can find online, such as, for example, bees cannot perceive the colour red very well as they do not have the receptors in their eyes to be able to see the colour red. However, they do love the colours purple and white. So if you want to attract bees, I would suggest planting these colours more so than reds. There are also academic studies you can find online. For example, this one carried out in 2019. It looked at the exotic and native flowers, and the top-ranked native flower on that list was wild marjoram, which attracts an array of bees and butterflies, as well as moths. So if you wanted to attract bees and butterflies, I would also suggest planting wild marjoram. On top of that, it's also a herb which could be used in the kitchen, so it's double good. But yeah, this is just to show you that there are many resources online if you do want to attract specific pollinators. But if you don't bother about what pollinators you'll attract, then just plant anything from this list. So, to summarise, pollinators are crucial to our ecosystems, as without them we won't be able to have the abundance of food we have or the healthy habitats. Planting pollinators all year round is important for their survival, as they need food all year round, and the flowers in this chart will attract an array of UK pollinators, not just bees and butterflies. And when they plant these flowers in variation, your garden has the potential of being bloom all year round and help support our pollinator populations. Thank you for watching.